I'm Bridget Krone and I'm the author of Small Mercies, and I'm going to be reading a chapter from this book for you today. I thought what would be quite fun is if I dressed up as one of the characters that appears in this chapter. And the character that I'm going to be is Aunt Flora, who is a very dear old woman. We're not sure quite how old she is. She's in the book it says she's as old as her tongue and a little bit older than her teeth. And so I am wearing my best old-fashioned dress with sailing boats, and I have a hat with a bit of bougainvillea, because bougainvillea is a flower that appears in the story. And I have a cardigan, but it is so hot I'm not going to wear the cardigan, but it's here as a prop. I have other props as well in front of me, some lemons and some avocados that Aunt Flora grows in her garden, and a couple of other things which will become apparent as I read. So the book that I'm reading from is the version that is for sale in the UK and the Commonwealth countries. If you are looking at this video in America, the book that you would get has a different cover, so don't be surprised if it looks different. Just a very quick little orientation. This chapter occurs on page 79 of the book. Mercy who's the main character in the story, is a little girl who grows up in Pietermaritzburg in South Africa. She's fostered by these two very dear, elderly and eccentric sisters who she calls her aunts. And it's the story of how Mercy has to find her courage and do something that's very difficult to try and keep her rather eccentric little family together and keep the house that she's living in from being demolished. The story in this story we meet Mercy first at school and then at home, where she goes to fetch something. There's a little boy in her class called Thando who's been given a punishment by the teacher that he hasn't deserved, and Mercy offers to help him with the punishment just as a way of showing support. And I think the rest of the story will speak for itself. Okay, chapter 14. Mercy found Thando on the stairwell outside the library. He had a bucket and a scrubbing brush, and he was looking up at an expanse of dirty concrete in front of him. Most of the grime was at shoulder height, where bodies had pressed against the wall, caught in the bottleneck created by the stairs. Over the years, this had made a greasy smear. "Hello," she said. "Lo," said Thando. "Is this your punishment from Mrs. Kriesel?" "Yeah." "Sorry." "Nah, it's okay. As my dad would say, you've buttered your bread, now you have to sleep on it." He laughed. "I'll help you if you want." "Yeah, except," Thando looked down at the single scrubbing brush in his hand, "I've only got one. Mr. Hartshorn's already locked up the supply room and gone home." "I'll go home and fetch one. I live close." Mercy ran to get her bike. Aunt Flora, me, was picking a frond of sword fern from the path when Mercy got home. "Mercy, dear, look, I have to rescue a little tiny, I think it's a letter of the alphabet." She climbed the red steps and pointed with the frond at her teacup. Mercy peeped into the teacup and saw a little bee scrabbling around in the sweet, milky liquid. I don't have a bee in my teacup, I'm afraid. No bees will be killed in the making of this video. Aunt Flora dipped the fern frond into the teacup, and the little bee hung on for dear life. "I'm just going to wash it in the fountain," she said, holding the frond and looking left and right with growing confusion. "Glory be, where is that fountain? It was here just a minute ago. Has it been stolen again?" She sighed and flicked the bee into a clump of canna lilies. Then it was as if she'd forgotten all about the fountain and the bee. "Mercy, my dear, hurry and wash your hands. Winnie and Ruby are coming, and we're going to have a lovely walk at the bird sanctuary." She lifted the corner of her cardigan to reveal a brown paper package tucked into the elastic of her tracksuit bottoms. I'm not wearing tracksuit bottoms. And I've got something nice for Winnie for her birthday. Mary, she called down the passage, we have to hurry. Winnie and Ruby are coming. They're going to be here any minute. Mercy found Aunt Mary out the back, heaving wet sheets onto the washing line. She didn't look as if she was expecting visitors. Mercy, sweetheart, said Aunt Mary, with a clothes peg in her mouth. There's something I need to tell you. News. I know. Some people called Winnie and Ruby are coming for tea. Well, that would be a surprise, said Aunt Mary, given that they've both been dead about 25 years. They were our friends when we were little girls. She stopped pegging the sheets and looked into the distance. We used to play hopscotch with them in our pyjamas on the pavement in Victoria Street in the summer. Mercy could not imagine Aunt Mary playing hopscotch in her pyjamas, nor could she imagine Victoria Street as a nice place to play. These days it was so full of supermarkets, car parks and street vendors. No, the news is, I'm thinking it would be a good idea for us to get a lodger. Aunt Mary wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. A lodger? We can fix up that back room over there. Aunt Mary nodded in the direction of the small dark cottage covered in wisteria behind the carport, which was used as a storeroom. It's got plumbing and a lavatory. We'll need to paint it, of course, and install a sink. Mercy was shocked. She wasn't sure what it would be like to have another person living with them. Having another person around might be another thing to worry about. We'd charge some rent, said Aunt Mary. We could do with a little extra money. It's getting difficult to make ends meet these days. We're not going to rent it to Mr. Craven, are we? Aunt Mary looked surprised and Mercy regretted mentioning his name. You remember him? No, we won't be renting it to Mr. Craven. We'll find someone nice. Someone nice? How would they know if the person was nice? We'll get started at the weekend. I'll ask Mr. DeVette to help. Mercy helped Aunt Mary pick up another wet sheet to haul over the washing line. Okay, she said, but I need to borrow a scrubbing brush to help someone at school clean a wall. I have to go back now. Under the big sink, I think, said Aunt Mary. We'll keep some tea for you. Aunt Mary never fussed about where Mercy was or who she was with. Sometimes that bothered Mercy, but today she was glad. Mercy pulled everything out onto the floor from under the big sink, but the scrubbing brush was not there. Only a pile of rags and old newspapers, a plastic cup full of old toothbrushes, and an ice cream container on which Aunt Flora had written string, 2 pieces too small to be of use. She heard the clunk of the kettle being plonked on the stove top. Then the screen door slapped and Aunt Mary passed her in the scullery and went into the kitchen. Mary, I do things over and over, but they don't stay done, said Aunt Flora. What things, dear? I forget, said Aunt Flora. I can't find the scrubbing brush anywhere, said Mercy, stepping into the kitchen. Aunt Mary looked at Aunt Flora. Aunt Flora looked in the sleeve of her cardigan and found only her hanky. That scrubbing brush was lost forever, probably wrapped in layers of newspaper and tucked away who knows where, inside the piano, inside a shoe, under a mattress. So can I take these old toothbrushes? Of course, and Mercy, she said, scrabbling in her handbag for some money, if that nice man is still on the corner selling newspapers, will you buy me a witness? I need to check on the going rate for garden cottages. So Mercy took the money and went back to school to help Tando clean the wall with old toothbrushes.